To call or not to call, that is the question. Whether or not to call a journalist is one that many PR professionals grapple with. While some journalists have publicly stated that they don't like to be called by PRs, there are certain circumstances when a phone call may be necessary to effectively pitch a story. Here are some situations when it may be appropriate to call a journalist. If you have a time-sensitive story or breaking news that needs to be covered immediately, a phone call may be the best way to get the journalist's attention and ensure that they are aware of the situation. In this case, it's important to be concise and to the point, providing only the essential information that they need to cover the story. Another situation could be if you have a complex or technical story. Sometimes a story may be too complex or technical to be adequately explained in an email or press release. In this case, a phone call can be an effective way to provide additional context, answer questions, and address any concerns the journalist may have. If you are trying to build a relationship with the journalist or editor, a phone call can be a good way to establish a personal connection and get to know them better. However, it's important to be respectful of their time and not to come across as pushy or overly aggressive. Even if a phone call is appropriate, you should always think about what time of day and which day of the week you're calling. Never call when they are on deadline or at the wrong time of day. For instance, don't call a breakfast producer late in the day when they could be off work. There are also many situations when it is not appropriate to call a journalist, such as cold calls. Calling a journalist out of the blue with no prior relationship or context can come across as intrusive and unprofessional. It's important to establish a relationship first and only call when there is a valid reason to do so. Non-urgent stories are another big no-no for calling. If the story is not time-sensitive and can be adequately explained in an email or press release, there is no need to call the journalist. Overly aggressive follow-ups are another huge no. If you've already sent a press release or email pitch and have followed up once or twice with no response, it is not appropriate to call repeatedly or come across as pushy or aggressive. The decision of whether or not to call a journalist depends on the circumstances and the nature of the story. If the story is urgent, complex, or requires relationship building, a phone call may be appropriate. However, it's important to be respectful of the journalist's time and preferences and to avoid being aggressive or intrusive. Some journalists prefer calls while others don't. And knowing which is one of the skills of media relations. It never hurts to ask what they prefer, and the journalist will always appreciate you being respectful of their time. If you're uncertain, this inside knowledge is something a PR agency will be able to help with.